She won't always say what she wants, but she will ask, not directly, not obviously, and definitely not in a way most men understand. The truth is, when a woman is thinking about intimacy, she doesn't lead with actions. She leads with questions, subtle ones, emotional ones, the kind that seem innocent on the surface but carry deeper meaning underneath. Most men miss these moments completely. They answer casually, joke their way through it, or worse, ignore it. And just like that, the attraction fades before it even has a chance to grow. If you can recognize these two questions and understand what she's really asking, you won't have to chase intimacy. It will come to you. Women rarely express desire in a direct, explicit way, not because they lack clarity about what they feel, but because their expression of attraction is often layered with emotional awareness, social conditioning, and a deep instinct for self-protection. Instead of stating what they want outright, they communicate through questions that carry emotional weight, questions that may seem casual or even unrelated on the surface, but are actually revealing far more than they appear to. These questions are not random. They are carefully chosen, often subconsciously, to gauge your mindset, your intentions, and your emotional stability. What makes this dynamic complex is that many men listen only to the words being spoken, not the meaning behind them. And as a result, they miss the subtle signals that indicate growing desire. When a woman begins to feel drawn toward you on a deeper level, her focus shifts from surface level interaction to emotional evaluation. She starts asking questions that explore who you are beneath your confidence, your humor, or your appearance. For example, she may ask about your past relationships, your views on commitment, or how you handle certain situations. These are not idle conversations. Each question is a doorway into understanding whether you are safe, consistent, and emotionally aware. Her desire does not operate independently of her sense of security. In fact, the two are deeply connected. The more emotionally grounded you appear, the more comfortable she becomes in allowing that desire to grow. Emotionally loaded questions also serve another purpose. They allow her to express interest without risking vulnerability too quickly. Direct expressions of desire can feel exposing, especially in a world where emotional investment is not always met with the same level of sincerity. By asking questions instead of making statements, she maintains a level of control while still moving the interaction forward. It gives her the ability to observe your responses, not just in terms of what you say, but how you say it, your tone, your body language, your level of presence. All of these factors contribute to the answer she is truly looking for. In many ways, the question itself is less important than the emotional signal behind your response. There is also a psychological depth to this approach that often goes unnoticed. Questions create space for connection. They invite dialogue, reflection, and emotional engagement, which are essential elements in building attraction that goes beyond the superficial. When she asks something that carries emotional weight, she is not just seeking information, she is creating an opportunity for you to meet her at a deeper level. If you respond with dismissiveness, sarcasm, or avoidance, it signals a lack of emotional readiness. But if you engage with calmness, clarity, and authenticity, it reinforces a sense of trust and alignment. This is where desire begins to shift from curiosity into something more intentional. Another important aspect to understand is that these questions often come in moments that don't seem significant. They might appear during casual conversations, late night talks, or even in passing remarks. Because they are not always framed as serious or intense, they can be easy to overlook. However, their timing is rarely accidental. They tend to surface when she is internally evaluating the connection, when she is deciding whether to lean in or pull back. In that moment, your response becomes more than just an answer. It becomes a reflection of your emotional intelligence and your ability to handle depth without discomfort. What complicates this further is that many men are conditioned to prioritize action over interpretation. They look for clear signals, direct communication, and obvious indicators of interest. But this approach does not align with how many women naturally express desire. The indirect nature of emotionally loaded questions requires a different kind of awareness, one that goes beyond listening to words and focuses on understanding intent. It requires patience, attentiveness, and the ability to remain present without trying to control the outcome. When you develop this awareness, you begin to see that attraction is not always loud or obvious. Sometimes it is quiet, subtle, and revealed through the questions she chooses to ask. Intimacy does not start with touch, proximity, or physical attraction. It begins in the mind, in the quiet and often unnoticed space where perception, emotion, and imagination start to align. Before a woman allows physical closeness, she first needs to feel mentally engaged, emotionally understood, and psychologically safe. This internal process is subtle but powerful, shaping how she sees you, how she interprets your behavior, and ultimately whether she feels drawn toward you in a meaningful way. What many people misunderstand is that physical intimacy is not the starting point. It is the result of a deeper internal connection that has already been formed in her thoughts and emotions. The mind acts as a filter, constantly processing your words, your tone, your consistency, and your emotional presence. Every interaction you have with her contributes to this internal narrative she is building about you. If your behavior feels unpredictable, superficial, or emotionally disconnected, her mind creates distance, regardless of how strong the physical attraction might initially be. But when your presence feels calm, grounded, and intentional, it begins to create a sense of ease within her. That ease is what allows her to relax her defenses. And it is within that relaxed state that intimacy starts to take shape. It is not forced or rushed. It develops naturally as her mind begins to associate you with comfort and clarity. There is also a strong element of imagination involved in this process. Before anything physical happens, she is already envisioning what it would feel like to be close to you, not just physically, but emotionally. She is asking herself whether you understand her, whether you listen beyond the surface, and whether you are capable of holding space for her thoughts and feelings without judgment. These internal questions are not always conscious, but they guide her behavior in a very real way. If the answers she finds within herself are reassuring, her openness increases. If they create doubt, even slightly, her desire begins to withdraw before it ever fully expresses itself. Emotional connection plays a central role in shaping this mental foundation. When conversations move beyond surface level topics and begin to explore perspectives, values, and personal experiences, something shifts. She starts to feel seen rather than just noticed. Being seen is different. It carries depth, attention, and a sense of presence that cannot be faked. This is where many men underestimate the power of how they communicate. It is not about saying more. It is about saying things with intention and awareness. A thoughtful response, a moment of genuine listening, or the ability to remain present without distraction can create a stronger sense of intimacy than any physical gesture in the early stages. Trust is another key component that forms in the mind before it ever translates into physical closeness. Without trust, intimacy feels risky rather than inviting. She needs to feel that you are consistent in your behavior, that your words align with your actions, and that you are not driven by impulse or temporary interest. This does not mean perfection, it means stability. When your presence feels stable, her mind stops searching for reasons to pull away. Instead, it begins to lean in, to explore, and to become more open to connection. This mental shift is often invisible, but it is the foundation upon which everything else is built. What makes this dynamic even more significant is that once intimacy is established in the mind, the physical aspect becomes a natural extension rather than a separate pursuit. There is no need to force it, chase it, or create artificial moments. It unfolds on its own because the mental and emotional groundwork has already been laid. This is why attempts to rush physical closeness without building that internal connection often feel empty or short-lived. The body may respond temporarily, but without the mind being engaged, the connection lacks depth and sustainability. Understanding that intimacy begins in the mind changes the way you approach connection entirely. It shifts the focus from trying to impress or escalate quickly to creating an environment where she feels mentally and emotionally at ease. It requires patience, awareness, and the ability to value depth over immediacy. When you recognize that her desire is shaped long before any physical moment occurs, you start to see that every conversation, every reaction, and every detail of your presence contributes to something much larger than it appears on the surface. The questions she asks are rarely just about gathering information. They are subtle evaluations designed to measure emotional safety, consistency, and trustworthiness. On the surface, her questions may appear casual, even playful at times, but beneath that tone lies a deeper intention. She is not simply curious about facts. She is trying to understand how you think, how you respond under pressure, and whether your presence feels stable enough for her to lower her guard. This is not a conscious strategy she carefully plans out. Rather, it is an instinctive process shaped by experience, awareness, and a natural need to protect her emotional well-being. Every question becomes a small window through which she observes your character. When a woman begins to feel a level of interest, her mind does not immediately move toward openness. It moves toward assessment. She wants to know whether the connection is safe to explore further. And because direct vulnerability can feel risky, she uses questions as a form of distance. This allows her to stay in control while still moving closer. For example, when she asks about your intentions, your past, or your values, she is not only listening to your answer, she is observing how comfortable you are with honesty, how consistent your words feel, and whether your energy aligns with what you are saying. In many ways, the emotional tone behind your response carries more weight than the content itself. These questions also reveal how you handle depth. Some men respond by deflecting, joking, or giving surface-level answers in an attempt to keep things light. While this may seem harmless, it often signals emotional avoidance. From her perspective, avoidance creates uncertainty, and uncertainty does not feel safe. On the other hand, when you respond with calmness, clarity, and a sense of self-awareness, it communicates that you are grounded and emotionally present. This does not mean you need to overshare or become overly intense. It means you are able to engage without discomfort. That ability alone can shift how she perceives you. There is also an element of pattern recognition in the way she evaluates your answers. She is not judging you based on a single response. She is looking for consistency over time. If your words change depending on the situation, or if your behavior contradicts what you claim, it creates a disconnect that her mind quickly picks up on. Safety is not built on isolated moments, it is built on reliability. When your responses consistently reflect honesty and emotional steadiness, her questions begin to soften. They become less about testing and more about connecting because the need to protect herself starts to decrease. Another important layer to this dynamic is emotional awareness. The questions she asks often touch on topics that reveal how you perceive relationships, handle conflict, or navigate personal challenges. These are not random areas of interest. They are directly tied to how safe she would feel being emotionally close to you. If your answers suggest blame, defensiveness, or a lack of accountability, it signals potential instability. But if your responses show reflection, responsibility, and a balanced perspective, it creates a sense of reassurance. She begins to see you not just as someone attractive, but as someone who can handle the weight of connection without creating chaos. Timing also plays a significant role in how these questions appear. They often arise when the interaction begins to deepen, when the initial attraction has already been established, and she is deciding whether to move forward or hold back. Because of this, they can feel unexpected or even out of place, especially if the conversation was previously light. However, their timing is intentional in the sense that they emerge when she needs clarity. In that moment, your response becomes a defining factor. It either reinforces her sense of safety or introduces doubt that can quietly shift her interest. What makes this process so nuanced is that it does not rely on obvious signals. There is no clear indication that you are being evaluated, no direct statement that she is testing your emotional stability. Instead, it unfolds through ordinary conversation, through questions that seem simple but carry deeper meaning. Recognizing this requires a level of awareness that goes beyond listening to words. It involves understanding intent, reading emotional context, and responding in a way that feels genuine rather than calculated. When you begin to see her questions as reflections of her need for safety rather than mere curiosity, your approach naturally changes. You become less focused on saying the right thing and more focused on being consistent, present, and self-aware. This shift removes the pressure to perform and replaces it with authenticity, which is ultimately what creates the sense of security she is looking for. Emotional depth holds a kind of quiet power that surface level charm simply cannot sustain over time. While charm may capture attention quickly, it often relies on performance, on saying the right things, creating momentary excitement, and maintaining an image that feels appealing in the short term. Emotional depth, on the other hand, is not about performance at all. It is about presence, awareness, and the ability to engage with someone beyond what is immediately visible. This difference becomes especially significant when attraction begins to move past the initial stage and into something more meaningful. At that point, what once felt impressive can start to feel empty if it lacks substance, while emotional depth begins to stand out in a way that feels grounding and real. Surface level charm tends to operate on predictability. Compliments, humor, confidence, these elements are effective, but they are also widely used and easily recognized. Over time, they can begin to feel repetitive because they do not require much vulnerability or self-awareness. Emotional depth, however, cannot be replicated so easily. It comes from a genuine understanding of oneself and an ability to engage with others in a way that feels intentional rather than rehearsed. When a man demonstrates emotional depth, it shows that he is not just reacting to the moment, but is actually present within it. That presence creates a sense of connection that charm alone cannot achieve because it makes the interaction feel personal rather than generic. One of the key aspects of emotional depth is the ability to listen without immediately trying to control or redirect the conversation. Many people hear words, but very few truly listen with the intent to understand. When someone feels genuinely heard, it creates a sense of validation that goes beyond attraction. It makes them feel seen. Being seen is not about being noticed on a superficial level. It is about feeling understood in a way that acknowledges thoughts, emotions, and experiences without judgment. This kind of engagement naturally draws people in because it satisfies a deeper emotional need that surface level charm does not address. Emotional depth also reflects a level of self awareness that is difficult to ignore. A person who understands their own emotions, patterns, and behaviors is far more capable of navigating connection without creating confusion or inconsistency. This stability becomes attractive because it reduces uncertainty. Instead of trying to figure out where they stand or what your intentions might be, a woman begins to feel a sense of clarity. That clarity allows her to relax, and it is within that relaxed state that attraction can grow more naturally. Surface level charm may create excitement, but emotional depth creates comfort, and comfort is what allows attraction to sustain itself over time. Another important dimension of emotional depth is the ability to handle uncomfortable or meaningful conversations without avoidance. When topics shift from light and playful to personal or reflective, many people instinctively pull back or deflect. This reaction often signals a lack of emotional readiness, even if it is unintentional. In contrast, someone with emotional depth remains steady in those moments. They do not rush to fill the silence or change the subject. They allow the conversation to unfold with patience and attention. This ability to stay present, even when the interaction becomes more vulnerable, communicates a level of emotional strength that is deeply attractive. It is also worth noting that emotional depth does not eliminate charm, it refines it. When charm is supported by depth, it becomes more authentic and less performative. Humor feels more natural, compliments feel more sincere, and confidence feels more grounded. Without depth, these same qualities can feel exaggerated or even hollow over time. This is why initial attraction that is based solely on surface level qualities often fades, while attraction rooted in emotional connection tends to deepen. The difference lies in the experience being created. One is temporary and dependent on stimulation, while the other is lasting and built on understanding. As connection evolves, emotional depth becomes increasingly important because it aligns with a fundamental human need for meaning. People are not just looking to be entertained or impressed, they are looking to feel something that resonates beyond the moment. When someone consistently demonstrates depth in how they communicate, respond, and engage, it creates a sense of trust that cannot be easily replaced. This trust is not formed through grand gestures or perfect words. It is built through consistency, awareness, and the ability to connect on a level that goes beyond appearances. A man's response carries far more weight than most realize because it shapes the emotional direction of the interaction in real time. Attraction is not a fixed feeling that either exists or doesn't. It is fluid, constantly shifting based on how each moment is handled. When a woman engages with you, especially on a deeper level, she is not only expressing interest, but also observing how you respond to that interest. Your words, your tone, your timing, and even your silence all communicate something. And in those subtle exchanges, attraction either strengthens or quietly begins to fade. What makes this dynamic so important is that women often pay closer attention to how something is said rather than just what is said. A confident but calm response can create a sense of ease, while a defensive or overly eager reaction can introduce tension. Even small moments, like how you answer a simple question or how you react to a slight challenge, can influence how she perceives you. If your response feels grounded and self assured, it signals emotional stability. But if it feels reactive, uncertain, or forced, it can create doubt, even if your intentions are good. Attraction thrives in emotional steadiness and weakens in inconsistency. There is also a timing element that plays a critical role. Responding too quickly, especially in an attempt to impress or please, can come across as approval seeking rather than genuine engagement. On the other hand, taking a moment to process and respond thoughtfully shows presence and control. It reflects that you are not driven by impulse, but by awareness. This difference may seem subtle, but it changes the entire tone of the interaction. When your responses feel intentional rather than automatic, it creates a sense of depth that naturally draws her in. Another layer to this is how you handle emotional cues. When a woman expresses something personal, even indirectly, your response becomes a measure of your emotional intelligence. Dismissing it, minimizing it, or turning it into a joke may feel like a way to keep things light, but it often signals a lack of understanding. In contrast, acknowledging what she says with calm attention, even without trying to fix or analyze it, shows that you are capable of holding space. That ability is rare and it creates a level of comfort that surface level interactions cannot achieve. Attraction grows in that space because it feels safe and real. Consistency in your responses is equally important. It is not enough to respond well once or twice. Your behavior over time needs to align with the image you present. If your responses shift depending on your mood, the situation, or what you think she wants to hear, it creates confusion, and confusion weakens attraction because it disrupts trust. When your responses remain steady, clear, and aligned with your values, it reinforces a sense of reliability. She begins to understand you not just through your words, but through your patterns. That predictability, when rooted in authenticity, becomes deeply attractive. There is also a tendency for some men to overcompensate in their responses, especially when they sense attraction. They may become overly agreeable, excessively expressive, or try too hard to maintain interest. While this may come from a place of enthusiasm, it often has the opposite effect. Attraction is not built through overextension, it is built through balance. A response that is measured, calm, and self contained communicates confidence far more effectively than one that feels exaggerated. It shows that you are comfortable within yourself rather than seeking validation from the interaction. Perhaps the most overlooked aspect is that sometimes what you don't say matters just as much as what you do. Silence, when used with awareness, can create space for connection. It allows the interaction to breathe rather than filling every moment with unnecessary words. A well timed pause or a composed reaction can communicate confidence in a way that words cannot. It shows that you are not trying to control the flow of the interaction, but are instead present within it. That presence creates a natural rhythm, and within that rhythm, attraction has room to grow organically.